There are moments in life when all it takes is one person to look at you the wrong way, and the whole world seems to be reminding you, this place is not for you. That morning on the frigid tarmac of Van Nuys Airport, a multi-million-dollar private jet came to a halt. Not because of the weather, not because of mechanical problems, but because a man believed that a woman's skin color and plain coat gave him the right to deprive her of her dignity. If it were you sitting on that stolen chair amidst those scornful eyes, what would you do? Be silent, fight, or let fate speak for you. Today, I invite you into a story about choice, about dignity, about the calm of a woman whose heart is stronger than any prejudice. If this story touches you, please gently leave a like, a share, and subscribe to the channel so that each week we can continue to tell humane and healing journeys together. Now, let's begin. Mornings at Van Nuys Airport are always strangely beautiful, both quiet and harsh. The first rays of the sun have not yet warmed the air, the ground is still covered in dew, and the distant sound of airplane engines echoes like the steady breathing of a city that never sleeps. Maya Carter stepped onto the airport steps with the air of a person who had no energy left. 3 days of negotiations with European partners, 3 nights of fitful sleep between nerve-wracking phone calls, and dozens of life or death decisions had left her eyes with slight dark circles, but her inner alertness was as sharp as a knife. Maya was not the type of woman who would catch your eye at first sight. She was dressed simply dark blue jeans, a gray sports jacket, and running shoes with slightly worn soles. No diamond rings, no flashy designer bags, no indication that she was the CEO of Carter Logistics, one of the largest transportation companies in the United States. But there are people whose presence does not need to be flashy. They enter a space and bring a calmness that slows down the world. Maya is that type of person. Elena Ramirez, the flight attendant on the Carter jet, quickly stepped out to greet Maya as soon as she saw the familiar figure. Elena gave a small but warm smile, the kind only shared between two people who had been on many after-hours flights and had many short but sincere conversations. "Welcome back, Miss Carter. I've prepared hot ginger tea, just the kind you like." Maya nodded slightly, the fog outside the airport clearing as the warmth of Elena's voice reached her. "Thank you, Elena. Today, all I need is silence and a chair to breathe in." Elena chuckled softly, stepping aside to lead Maya into the cabin. "You always have your seat. Seat 2A is still available." The Carter Jet G700 cabin remains the same, luxurious but understated. The deep brown leather seats, the polished walnut wood, the large windows overlooking the runway like a framed picture. In that peaceful space, Maya can leave behind all her roles: CEO, leader, symbol of success for Black women in logistics, and just be herself. She set her canvas tote bag down in seat 2A. It was old, the seams a little loose, the strap frayed, but inside it was a photo of her mother. The Mayan woman she always carried with her on every trip. Before Maya could sit down, her phone rang. It was a text from Marcus, the corporate communications director. Just 3 words: "Board wants update." Maya sighed. She could have predicted this. As a Black woman at the top of a competitive industry, you don't just have to make the right decisions, you have to make the wrong decisions. As soon as she sat down in seat 2, Maya closed her eyes for a few seconds, trying to let her mind drift. In this rare moment of silence, she listened to the soft breathing of the leather cushion under her, the faint sound of the air conditioner in the distance, and the footsteps of Elena preparing drinks. A little peace. But peace, as they say, doesn't last long. The cabin door swung open with a loud bang. The sound of leather shoes on the floor was firm, quick, and impatient. Maya didn't open her eyes right away, but Elena turned her head, and with just one glance, Elena knew that Maya's moment of peace was over. The man who had just entered the cabin was the type of person that Elena or anyone working in airline service would need 3 seconds to identify: arrogance in the front, demand in the back. A tailored dark blue suit, Italian leather shoes, so shiny they reflected the cabin lights, a large gold watch on his wrist. Gelled hair pressed close to his scalp, the air of a man who believes he is the center of every conversation. Clayton Reed, investor, founder of Reed and Hawthorne Capital, who frequently appears on financial podcasts with his bombastic voice and overly confident smile. Clayton looked around the cabin, as if checking the quality of the VIP room he had just paid for. Then his eyes met Maya. He looked her up and down: sport jacket, jeans, hair tied back, old tote bag. And in those 3 seconds, Maya saw the judgment clearly in his eyes, hasty conclusions, undisguised prejudice. Clayton turned to Elena and asked in a discourteous voice, "Where is my C2A?" Because surely, he glanced at Maya. "It's not hers." Elena paused about to explain, but Maya opened her eyes. Her gaze was soft but not weak. "Do you need something?" Maya asked softly. Clayton raised an eyebrow. "I need you to stand." "That's my chair." Elena immediately stepped forward. "Mr. Reed, there are no fixed seat numbers. This is the Carter Logistics Group's private jet," and Clayton interrupted. "And I'm a VIP. I'm in 2A. Don't make me say it twice." Maya didn't want to argue, didn't want to miss her flight, didn't want to turn this already tiring morning into a battlefield. She stood up. "It's okay. I can change seats." While Maya moved to the back seat, Clayton whispered low enough for her to hear, "Know that?" Elena bit her lip and looked at Maya, her eyes filled with guilt. Maya just smiled slightly, as if to say that everything would be okay. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over. The Carterjet cabin was bathed in soft yellow light, but Clayton Reed's entrance was like a cold breeze through the door. The atmosphere changed in a way that was hard to describe. Elena noticed it immediately. Passengers like Clayton didn't usually need to say much to cause a disturbance. They just walked in. Clayton adjusted his collar, then dropped into seat 2A that Maya had just given up, as if he was taking back what was rightfully his. He didn't thank anyone, didn't nod, didn't look at anyone kindly. He simply took the seat. Small actions but tell a lot about a person. Maya sat in the back row, row 4, 3 rows away from Clayton. From her perspective, he looked like a sore spot in an otherwise peaceful picture. Maya wasn't upset. She was just used to it. She had seen this kind of behavior since she first started working until she sat in the CEO chair. The judging looks, the smirk when she thought she didn't belong in this posh place. The sarcastic words as light as a breath, but as sharp as a thorn. Maya has been through more than that, but that doesn't mean she doesn't feel tired. Elena appeared beside him, leaned down slightly and whispered, "I'm sorry, Miss Carter. If you'd like to change seats." Maya shook her head, her voice low but warm. "It's okay, Elena. A chair isn't worth making everyone more nervous." Elena looked at Maya with gratitude, but deep down there was also a hint of worry. People like Clayton didn't stop at just stealing a seat. They always needed something more to prove that they were right. Maya leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She didn't want to think about it anymore. She just wanted to fly to New York, attend the meeting, and then stay in her small apartment on Riverside Drive. But today, it seemed the heavens were testing her composure. The cabin door closed. Captain Rivera announced takeoff. The plane began to taxi down the runway. As the engine hum increased, Maya tried to let her mind drift with deep breaths. But a few seconds later, Clayton's voice broke the silence. "Seriously, the Wi-Fi password is this long. Who designs this stuff?" His voice echoed throughout the cabin as if he were blaming the world for a password longer than 8 characters. Elena kept a polite smile. "Mr. Reed, I will check the signal for you." Clayton Kawate, "Yeah, do that. And bring me sparkling water. Not the cheap kind. The real stuff." Elena turned away, trying to stay calm. Maya opened her eyes, her gaze following the young girl silently. Elena's job was to serve customers, but no one deserved that kind of attitude. A soft sigh escaped Maya from the row behind her. Maya turned around and saw the young blonde girl, who was with Clayton, hugging her laptop to her chest like a shield. "Are you okay?" Maya asked softly. The girl was startled but forced a smile. "I'm fine. I'm used to it." That sentence, said as lightly as the wind, was enough to make Maya feel a pang. Familiar means this happens a lot. Too much. Maya nodded, not wanting to make the girl feel awkward. But a familiar feeling began to rise in Maya's heart. A deep resentment, not for herself, but for the weaker person who was suffering. In that moment, Maya suddenly realized this morning's trouble might not stop at just changing seats. The Carter jet shuddered as it lifted off the ground. The plane soared into the sky with a steady hum of engines. Maya closed her eyes, letting the sound lull her into a rare state of rest. But Clayton was not about to leave the cabin alone. He talked on the phone, loudly, clearly, boastful. "They say the interest rate is not suitable. Please. I just have to bang on the table, and they will change their mind." People like them don't have the guts to refuse me. Maya opened her eyes. Elena looked down from the front, frowning slightly. She couldn't tell Clayton to keep the volume down. Airline rules allowed cell phone use at cruising altitude, and only if it was too disruptive to the cabin did the crew have the right to intervene. But Maya knew people like Clayton don't stop unless forced to. Maya tried to pull herself away from the sound. She looked at the picture of her mother tucked into the tote bag, barely peeking out from the edge of the fabric. The look in her mother's eyes in the picture always made Maya feel at ease. "You don't need to scream to prove you're strong," her mother had said. "Your calmness is your strength." Maya smiled slightly at the memory. She adjusted her seatbelt, pulled the thin blanket over her legs, telling herself she just needed to get some sleep. But just then Clayton stood up. He picked up the unfinished glass of ice water, put it down on the table, and walked straight to the end of the cabin where Maya was sitting. Elena called out, "Mr. Reed, can I help?" Clayton waved his hand and continued walking as if this cabin were his living room. Maya opened her eyes when she heard footsteps stop right in front of her. Clayton stood there, arms crossed, head tilted at Maya, as if observing something displeasing. "Can you rest?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "The chair here is small. It should suit you." Maya did not reply. "No need to reply." Clayton continued, his voice lower but sharper. "Look, I didn't mean to upset you earlier. But people should sit where they belong. That's just how things work." Right? Maya looked him straight in the eye, unafraid, unshaken. But before she could answer, Elena appeared. "Mr. Reed, please return to your seat. The plane is about to enter mild turbulence." Clayton smiled faintly. "Turbulence? I'm not afraid. You should worry about others." He looked at Maya with an appraising gaze once more, as if he still believed she was taking something that didn't belong to him. Maya felt clearly this would not stop here. But she kept silent, maintained the calm her mother had taught her, maintained the inner strength she had cultivated over the years. Elena clenched her hands. Maya gently placed her hand on Elena's, as if to reassure her. "It's okay." But inside Maya, the pieces began to come together. Clearly, bit by bit, like a wave rolling beneath the surface. Clayton turned back to the front seat, but his eyes swept over Maya once more as if to assert his authority. As he sat down in seat 2, Amaya could sense something building in the air. It wasn't fatigue, it wasn't discomfort, but it is a confrontation Maya never sought. But if it came, she was ready. In that moment, the plane shook slightly. It was a very small shake, but it made Maya's heart clench, not with fear but with foreboding. Her ordeal had not yet begun, but it was drawing very close. And in the next part, it all starts to unfold. The Carter jet entered a stable cloud layer at about 38000 feet. The light outside faded the deep blue sky, stretching out like a giant mirror to the horizon. Inside the cabin, the steady sound of the engines like a giant heartbeat carried the passengers through the silence. But that silence is just on the surface. Maya Carter leaned her head back in her seat, eyes closing slightly. She knew sleep would be elusive, not because of the altitude or the work awaiting her in New York, but because the man in the front row, Clayton Reed, was turning this small cabin into an undeclared battlefield. As soon as the plane reached a stable altitude, Clayton rang Elena's bell 3 times. The first time to ask why the water was too cold. The second time to complain that the paper towels weren't soft enough. The third time just to say, "There's a strange smell in this cabin. Check it out." Elena was patient, but Maya saw the weariness in the young girl's eyes. Even a veteran waitress could be exhausted when faced with a customer like Clayton. Maya opened her eyes and gently removed the small bracelet, something she always wore out of habit. Something her mother had said brought her peace. She turned it between her fingers, feeling the metal warm with her body heat. Up ahead, Clayton raised his voice again. "Hannah, give me the red folder." "No, the bright red one. You have the wrong one." His voice cut through the air like a dull knife, cutting into the silence the other passengers clung to. Hannah Collins, the young woman who was with him, hurriedly opened her laptop, took out each document, her hands shaking slightly when Clayton snapped, "Gosh, am I always this slow?" Hannah bowed her head and said softly, "I'm sorry. I just... What? Lack of focus. This is a job, Hannah. If you want to continue working in this industry, you have to hurry." Maya listened to every word, every sentence. She felt something touch her heart, not anger, but understanding. Because Maya was someone's Hannah once. Had to endure those words, had tried 200% to prove her worth. But Maya was different. She no longer bowed her head. Elena walked down the aisle, stopping next to Maya. "Miss Carter, are you okay?" Elena asked softly, trying to keep the irritation at Clayton out of her voice. Maya opened her eyes and smiled reassuringly. "I'm fine. How about you?" Elena let out a small breath. "I can handle it. But he's too much. That's a bit too light." Maya replied, her voice still soft, but a bit deeper. Elena bent down to pour water for Maya. "If you want to change your place in front, I can arrange it." Maya shook her head. "Elena, don't let someone like him dictate your morning. I'm used to it." Elena looked at Maya for a long time, as if trying to understand something more in that sentence. Then she nodded and left. Maya folded her arms and looked out the window. The clouds below were layered like endless ribbons. The view was so beautiful it felt like one could walk on them. Peaceful as it was, but the cabin wasn't. About half an hour later, as Maya was dozing off, Clayton stood up his chair, banging against the back of the chair in front of Elena. He muttered, "This Wi-Fi is rubbish. I paid for premium service, and this is what happens." Maya opened her eyes. Clayton stood in the doorway, took a deep breath, and looked straight at Maya as if he remembered something. He started down the stairs to the end of the cabin. Elena saw and immediately came forward. "Mr. Reed, the plane is entering a light wind zone. Please." Clayton did not listen. He continued walking, his leather shoes clicking on the floor. As he approached, Maya sat up straight, her eyes remaining absolutely calm. Clayton stopped in front of her. "You're blocking the entrance to the lavatory," he said in a voice that made it clear to anyone it was a lie. Maya looked over at the bathroom door next door. There was nothing blocking it. "It's hard to hide anything in this wide aisle," Maya said softly. Clayton shrugged, then did something Maya didn't expect. He lightly kicked the edge of the tote bag at her feet, as if testing her reaction. The airbag flipped to the side. A corner of Maya's mother's photo poked out. Clayton leaned down, smirking. "That's an old bag. I'd say these would be under $50. Maya's eyes paused, not because of the value of the bag, but because of the gentle but profound insult. Elena saw this and immediately approached Mr. Reed. "Please don't touch the passenger's belongings." Clayton straightened, folding his arms. "I'm just telling the truth. If she wants to fly first class, she should at least look like the right person." Hannah was a few rows away, eyes wide, as if she wanted to speak but didn't dare. Maya took a breath, put her feet on the floor, and stood up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't show any attitude. She didn't let anger control her actions. Her voice was low but steady as the ground. "Mr. Reed, are you trying to cause trouble?" Clayton sneered. "Causing trouble? I just want my space kept in order." Maya clenched her fingers slightly, the only sign of discomfort. Elena interrupted, her voice firmer than usual. "You need to go back to seat 2A. The plane is going to be turbulent." Clayton shrugged and turned away. But when he turned his back to Maya, he said something that Elena heard clearly, and Maya heard even more clearly. "Don't lie. Some people just don't know their place." "Don't know their place." Maya stood still. At 38000 feet, the words fell like a stone in her heart. Not because she was offended, she had heard such things all her life, but because Clayton was saying it in front of young people like Hannah, like Elena, people who were prone to believing they really had no place in spaces like this. Maya returned to her chair and sat down. Her hand unconsciously touched her tote bag. Next to it, the edge of her mother's photograph was still exposed. Her mother's eyes in the photo seemed to be looking straight at Maya, as if asking, "What will you choose? Be silent or stand up?" Maya closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, then opened them calmer than before. She whispered in her head, "I'm not getting up yet, Mom, but if I have to, I will." The cabin was quiet again for a few minutes. Then Maya sensed something, a small, vague but certain wave. A wave that foretold that things between her and Clayton would not end here. Not today. Not on the ground. Right here in the sky. And when it comes, everything will change. The Carter jet continued to glide through a stretch of calm air, sunlight, filtering through thick clouds, bathing the cabin in a soft white light that seemed to cast a false veil of stillness over everything. But Maya Carter sensed clearly this calm was only a facade. Underneath the silence, something was cracking. Clayton Reed was not the type to stop while others waited. Tolerance for men like him was not a virtue, it was an invitation. He sat in seat 2A, but his eyes kept darting back to where Maya was sitting. It was as if for being there was a thorn in his side that he had to remove at all costs. Elena, standing in the galley, glanced at Maya with concern. Hannah sat more silent than a shadow. Meanwhile, Maya tried to concentrate on the small screen in front of her, but she knew she was only pretending. The calmness in her heart was more fragile than usual. My mother once told me, you don't have to prove anything unless someone tries to take away your peace. Today Clayton is doing just that. About 10 minutes later, without warning, Clayton stood up from his seat. Seat 2, pushed back, violently hitting the seat behind it, making Elena's heart jump. He glanced around then, as if finding his target, began walking down the back of the cabin straight toward Maya. Elena hurriedly followed, trying to keep her voice soft. Mr. Reed, can I help you with anything? Clayton waved his hand. I'm just going to the back to get my things. No need to follow. He spoke as if the plane were his, as if he decided every step in this space. Hannah, in the third row, looked up in surprise when she saw Clayton change direction in a straight line towards Maya. Her eyes were filled with worry, but she was too used to fear to speak. Maya saw Clayton before he stopped. She sat up slowly, her hands still in her lap, showing no sign of resistance. But there was something deep and still in Maya's eyes, like the still surface of a lake before a storm. Clayton stood right in front of her. You're blocking the way to the baggage compartment, he said deliberately. He pointed to the small door behind Maya, the side cargo door, which no one on this plane had the right to open except the crew. Maya calmly replied, you have no reason to get off in this area. That door is not for passengers. Clayton chuckled and tilted his head. Are you sure? I think I know where I left my shirt. And maybe I left my wallet in there. Elena interrupted, her voice restrained, but clear. Mr. Reed, that luggage compartment cannot be opened at cruising altitude. If you need anything, I can bring it. Clayton turned to Elena, frowning. I didn't ask you. I was talking to her. He turned back to look at Maya, as if she were his only source of hindrance. Maya leaned back in her chair. You might want to go back to your seat before you cause trouble for the whole cabin. The words were as light as a breath, but each word carried weight, and Clayton hated it. He took a breath in, kicked Maya's tote bag hard. Just a small kick, but just enough force to send the bag toppling to one side, sending all the contents sliding out onto half the cabin floor. A photo upside down. One corner of the frame is cracked. Maya didn't react immediately. She just looked down. But her eyes lingered on the portrait of her mother, the one that had accompanied her every step of the way from her first knock on the door of her startup to her first CEO seat. Clayton looked at that scene, then curled his lips. This thing looks worse than I thought. It deserves to be in the trash. Elena almost burst into tears with anger. You can't do that, she said, her voice rising above professional levels for the first time. Clayton crossed his arms. I just touched it lightly. If her stuff is so fragile, she should have left it at home. There was a long silence, not a helpless silence, but the silence before the storm. Maya bent down and picked up the photograph. She placed it back in her pocket very slowly, very carefully. Her fingers stroked the edge, as if comforting the spirit of her mother. When she looked up, her eyes had changed. No more patience, no more reassuring, no more waiting for the flight to pass peacefully. But it was the eyes of a person who had reached the very limit of his patience. Maya stood up. The atmosphere in the cabin changed dramatically. Even the engine noise seemed to drop a beat. Hannah put her hand over her mouth. Elena stood frozen. Clayton took a half step back, not out of fear, but because he hadn't expected such a resolute reaction. Maya looked straight at him. Her voice was not loud, but each word was clear. Mr. Reed, go back to your chair. And don't ever touch my things again. Clayton laughed. You're threatening me. Right here on this plane. He waved his hand dismissively. You have no right to. Maya was undeterred. You have offended me. And you cannot be allowed to continue to undermine the safety of an aircraft. Clayton tilted his head. Safe, because I kicked your cheap bag. Maya didn't answer. Instead, she raised her hand to her left wrist. A small button located under the watch face. A button that only the aircraft owner has the right to press. And Maya pressed it decisively, without hesitation, without fear. In the forward cabin, a small indicator light came on next to the cockpit door. Captain Samuel Rivera glanced at it. He put his hand on his seatbelt, then looked at the first officer. "You hold the controls. I'm going down to the cabin." The cockpit door opened. Clayton heard footsteps and turned around with a triumphant look on his face, as if he had just caught Maya doing something wrong. But when he saw Captain Rivera approaching with a majestic, solemn gait, Clayton frowned. Finally, Clayton said loudly, "You came just in time." This woman, the captain didn't look at Clayton. Not for a second. He just looked at Maya and said in a low, respectful voice, "Miss Carter, we have a priority signal." "What are your requests?" Clayton gasped. Hannah almost dropped her laptop. Elena covered her chest as if she had just released something that had been weighing her down for a long time. Maya stood up straight and neat. She looked at Clayton one last time, then turned to the captain. "I did not feel safe with this passenger. He was threatening, disruptive, and violated my personal belongings." Captain Rivera nodded. "No need to ask further. We will handle it immediately." Clayton burst out in a choked voice, "Deal. I'm the one who's offended here, she." The captain signaled for silence, the silence that only an experienced pilot could create. "Mr. Reed," the captain said, "get back in your seat. We'll go back to Van Nuys and turn this over to the FAA." The cabin went silent. A few seconds later, it became clear to Maya. This was just the beginning. The real storm coming in the sequel. Carterjet's cabin isn't huge, but the moment Captain Samuel Rivera steps out of the cockpit, the space feels cramped. Not because he's big, though he's built like a steel pillar, but because he has the air of a man born into discipline, living under pressure, and holding the lives of dozens of people in his hands. Clayton Reed watched Captain Rivera approach and reflexively took a step back. Perhaps for the first time since boarding the plane, he felt he was not the most powerful person in the room. Rivera stopped right next to Maya, standing straight, like an officer respecting a superior, even if that superior was wearing jeans and a gray sports jacket. "Miss Carter," he said in a low but clear voice, "we have received your priority signal. Please advise your request." Clayton immediately interjected, "This is absurd. I'm the one who needs protection." Rivera didn't turn his head. His eyes never left Maya, and that made Clayton speechless for a few seconds. Looking at the pilot, standing at attention waiting for Maya to speak, he understood that he had misjudged this woman in the most foolish way. Maya tilted her head slightly as if choosing her words. No anger, no tremor, just the precision of someone who knows she has the right to speak the truth and that it will be heard. "Captain," Maya said slowly, "I don't feel safe continuing to fly with Mr. Clayton Reed." Rivera nodded, not asking why, not needing further proof. Priority was given to the plane's owner, and Maya was that person. "Mr. Reed has been consistently disruptive. Maya continued trespassing on my personal belongings, insulting staff, and intentionally moving around the cabin without permission." Clayton narrowed his eyes. "You're making this up?" "I just accidentally touched your tattered bag." Elena stood nearby. Her heart pounding, she opened her mouth about to say something, but Maya gently raised her hand to stop her. Not because Maya was afraid that Elena would mess things up, but because Maya knew her words were enough. Captain Rivera tilted his head slightly, then said, "Miss Carter, how do you want to proceed? We can remove the disruptive passenger now, or return to Van Nuys and hand her over to the FAA." Clayton jumped up. "You can't do that. I have an important meeting." Only then did Rivera turn to look at Clayton for the first time. A brief look, but enough to make Clayton swallow his words. Maya stood in that moment, a moment that years before she might not have been strong enough to stand. Her patience, all this time, was not a bow. It was a choice. But now, that choice had reached its final point. She looked up at Captain. "I want the plane to turn back." Hannah above raised her hand to cover her mouth, whispering in shock, "Oh my God." Elena let out a small breath, as if she had relieved someone else of her pain. As for Clayton, he laughed dryly. "Come back, you're crazy. You have no right to." Maya interrupted, her voice so calm it silenced the cabin. "I'm the owner of this Carterjet, Mr. Reed. Here time seems to stop." Clayton was stunned. Completely. He looked Maya up and down, as if he needed to verify the information. A black woman in plain clothes was the owner of the plane he was on. He blinked repeatedly, trying to get out the question. "Who are you?" Maya did not answer him. She looked at Captain Rivera and said, "Go ahead, Captain." Rivera nodded once, a weighty professional nod. Yes, Miss Carter. He turned and walked straight to the cockpit. Just a few seconds later, a stern voice came through the cabin speaker. Here is your captain speaking. We are initiating a return to base procedure according to owner request. Please remain seated and fasten your seatbelts. No sign of emotion, no side. No blame. But the message is as clear as the sky outside. The flight is turning around. Because Maya said so. Clayton grabbed the chair, almost screaming. You can't do that, I'll sue. Maya turned to look at him for the first time. Not a challenging look, not a look of anger. But it is the supernatural gaze of a person who does not need to raise his voice to make others quiet. Mr. Reed, Maya said slowly, this plane is costing about $6,000 an hour to operate. Turning it around will cost another $9,000. And I can afford it. He was silent. Completely. The man who had been screaming just a moment ago now stood like a stone statue. Maya continued, her voice unshaken. Can you afford it? Clayton opened his mouth, but no words came out. For the first time on the flight, he knew he lost. Not because of money, but because real power doesn't need screaming. The plane began to tilt to the left. Hannah looked out the window, her hands gripping the straps. She quietly repeated the captain's words. It's turning. He's really turning the plane. Elena stood next to Maya, whispering emotionally. You did the right thing, Miss Carter. Maya sat down in seat 4A and buckled her seatbelt, but her heart still ached as she thought about the photo of her mother being kicked away. About the belittling words. About how people like Clayton believed they could judge someone's worth based on their appearance. But she didn't regret her choice. Not one bit. She put her hand on the tote bag and whispered to herself, Mom, I kept what you said. I didn't start it, but I know when to end it. Outside the window, the sun was setting lower, casting a pale yellow cast on the wings of the plane. The cabin was quiet, very quiet. But Maya knows this is just the calm before a new storm. The storm will come when they hit ground, when Clayton faces the police, when truth and power collide with more force than the 400,000-foot wind. She looked straight ahead where Clayton was sitting absent-mindedly on seat 2A, where he had confidently sat down as if it was his own seat. Seat 2A. Just a seat. But today, it has become a symbol of what people think they have the right to take away from others' dignity. Maya sighed a slow breath. She knew this flight would be in FAA records. She knew Clayton would fight back. She knew the real battle was just beginning. But she was not afraid, because there are moments in life when we have to choose to stand up, even if it means turning the whole plane around. And Maya Carter today chose. The Carter jet banked slightly to the left, the sound of the engines echoing through the cabin like a drumbeat, signaling the start of a grand ceremony. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew from the moment the plane turned, Clayton Reed's fate was no longer in his hands. The change was not loud. It happened in silence. In the slight tilt of the cabin, in the soft howl of the wind against the fuselage. And in the eyes of each person on Carter jet, each one different, but all felt the same thing: the plane was carrying the truth, returning to its starting point to face justice. Maya Carter sat quietly in seat 4, her hands on her knees, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Her stance was not that of a victor, nor that of a wounded person. Rather, it was that of someone who had accepted responsibility for reclaiming respect that should never have been lost. Clayton Reed was the complete opposite. He was frozen in seat 2A, his hands gripping the arms so tightly his knuckles turned white. This can't be, he muttered, as if trying to find a way out of a nightmare. Hannah Collins, the young assistant who accompanied him, sat in the window seat, her head bowed, her lip trembling slightly. It was the first time she had seen Clayton lose control so completely. A man like him, used to giving orders, using threats, using the highest position in the room, now sat motionless, like a student waiting to be reprimanded. Elena stood in the back of the cabin, her hands gripping the edge of her seat, both anxious and relieved. The moment Maya pressed the priority button, something Elena had witnessed only once in her career, the full gravity of the situation became clear. And Elena knew Maya had made this decision not to retaliate, but to protect everyone on board. The cabin speakers sounded again, Captain Rivera's voice calm but majestic. This is the captain. We are 20 minutes away from Van Nuys Airport. Please remain seated for landing procedures. Law enforcement has been notified. The last sentence made Clayton jump. Law enforcement police. What are they doing here? He turned to Elena, trying to cling to his last bit of power. I demand you talk to the captain right now. I didn't break any laws. Elena stood up straight, her eyes losing their usual softness. Mr. Reed, I cannot interfere with aviation safety procedures. I don't care, Clayton yelled. Get me into the cockpit right now. Maya turned to face him. Her voice was not high, but the sharpness made Clayton stop mid-sentence. Mr. Reed, you are asking for something illegal, Maya added word by word, steady and firm. And you broke the law the moment you deliberately caused a disturbance in the cabin. Clayton turned around and shouted, I'm not causing trouble. I'm just demanding my rights. You're the one. Just then, the Carter jet lurched as it began its descent. The smooth glide sent Clayton staggering, forcing him to grab the handrail. And it was that moment, the moment he lost his balance, that exposed the vulnerability within the seemingly invincible man. Hannah whispered enough for Maya to hear, but not enough for Clayton to notice. Thank you for standing up today. Her voice was trembling, as if she had just made an important choice in her life. Maya turned around and replied softly, I deserve respect. Everyone does. The ground gradually appeared through the window, long silver-gray runways, miniature model maintenance vehicles, and right at the end of the taxiway, the flashing red and blue lights of a police car. Clayton saw it first. The color made him hold his breath. A chill ran down his spine. No, no, Maya, you can't do that. I have a job, a family, a reputation. Maya stared straight ahead, unblinking. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. She replied, those things of yours do not include the right to insult others. The Carter jet landed smoothly, its wheels touching the ground so lightly that there was barely any jolt, but in Clayton's mind, the touch felt like a sentence. The plane taxied slowly, a long way, then stopped in an area away from the terminal, a place reserved for special situations. 2 black SUVs with flashing lights and 3 police cars stood by. Hannah raised her hand to her mouth. Elena clenched her fists. Maya remained silent, as if she were just witnessing what was to come. The moment the cabin door opened, a cold breeze rushed, and carrying the smell of fuel and the crackling of radios. 2 port police officers boarded first, followed by an FAA representative. A soldier nodded to Captain Rivera. The captain responded with a single sentence, passenger Reed seat 2A. Clayton jumped up like he had been electrocuted. I object, I'm not going anywhere. This is a mistake. An officer raised his hand. Sir, please step forward. I didn't do anything wrong. I was just sitting in my seat. He turned to Maya, his eyes pleading. Say something. Explain. I didn't mean it. Maya remained seated, her face strangely calm. Mr. Reed, she said, an adult is responsible for his actions. Clayton's eyes were bloodshot. For a moment, his arrogance melted away, revealing the fear of a man realizing for the first time that he could not use his voice, money, or position to get away with the consequences. 2 officers stepped closer. Elena turned away. Hannah bowed her head, hiding her tears. Clayton was led down the stairs as the cold wind whistled across the tarmac. When the cabin was left with only Maya, Elena, and Hannah, the air was heavy but cleaner, as if a layer of toxic smoke had just lifted. Elena asked softly, Are you okay? Maya nodded. Fine. Part of being a leader is knowing when to protect yourself and those around you. Hannah bit her lip and approached Maya. I am grateful to you. Without you, no one on this flight would have the chance to be respected. Maya smiled slightly. You deserve a chance at justice. The cabin door closed. The engines began to roar again, signaling that the Carter jet was preparing for takeoff again. But Maya knows the next flight will be more than just a flight. It will be the beginning of a larger confrontation where truth and power will continue to face each other. She looked out the window where the police lights were fading away. One chapter has just closed, but the real storm is just beginning to form. Carter jet departed the Van Nuys runway for the second time that afternoon, leaving behind police lights fading in the dusty air. The cabin was quiet again, an eerie silence after a small storm had just passed, but one knew there were still swirling winds somewhere in the sky ahead. Maya Carter sat still in seat 4, her eyes on the sky that stretched out before her like a long streak of light, but her mind wasn't in the sky. It was somewhere else, a place where twisted stories could travel faster than a jetliner. Elena poured Maya a glass of water and placed it on the small table in front of her. Miss Carter, are you okay? Elena's voice was soft, worried, and respectful. Maya nodded. I'm fine. Don't worry. Elena pursed her lips but said nothing more. She settled into the chair opposite her eyes, still dazed. Hannah Collins was different. She sat in the front row, her hands clasped together until her knuckles were white. Hannah had been silent since takeoff, not touching her laptop, not saying a word. But Maya could sense a heavy weight on the young woman's shoulders. About 40 minutes after takeoff, Maya opened her phone. The plane's Wi-Fi signal had just been reactivated. Full-screen notifications, email, text messages, press notifications. Her assistant Dominic texted her repeatedly. Maya, we have a problem. The media is blowing up. Call me back as soon as you can. Maya exhaled slowly. She had expected this. She just hadn't thought it would come so soon. Elena glanced at her face and saw the change. Is something serious? Maya didn't reply right away. She opened a link Dominic had sent her. Black CEO causes chaos on private plane. Forces pilot to turn around because he didn't like passenger's face. Right below the headline is a photo of Clayton Reed dressed in a formal suit, handcuffs on his hands, but cropped so cleverly that viewers might think he's just getting out of a car. And the large subtitle line runs right below Clayton Reed. I was humiliated and threatened on air. At that moment, Hannah turned to look at Maya. You saw it. Her voice trembled slightly, as if she was afraid of something. Maya put the phone down and leaned back in her chair. She knew the pattern. Lie first. Truth later. Whoever spoke first set the tone. Clayton knows that better than anyone. She opened the video attached to the article. The screen lit up, revealing Clayton's face, trying to look more vulnerable than usual. She threatened me, he said, his voice trembling theatrically. She screamed at me. She told the pilot to turn around. We feared for our lives. Hannah put her hands over her mouth. Oh my God, he's lying. He's lying about everything. Elena stood up abruptly. How could he? Maya, you have to speak up. You can't let him overturn the truth like that. Maya closed her eyes for a moment. She wasn't angry. She wasn't panicking. But a familiar feeling crept into her chest, the feeling of years of having to prove herself twice as much because of the color of her skin. Once again, history repeats itself, but with a new face. Maya opened her eyes and calmly said Clayton was prepared for this before he was taken away. He was not stupid. He knew he was being captured, so he immediately became a victim. Elena gritted her teeth. But he is the one who caused the trouble. Yes, Maya replied. But in the eyes of the public, whoever says it first wins. At least at first. Hannah bowed her head, her hands clasped together. I'm sorry, Maya. I worked with him. I knew he had press connections. I should have expected this. Maya shook her head. It wasn't my fault. But I'm the one at a disadvantage. Hannah's voice choked. Maya placed a gentle hand on Hannah's shoulder. Hannah, this isn't the first time I've met a man who thinks his word is more important than the truth, simply because he's confident the world is on his side. Elena nodded vigorously. But I have evidence. The cabin camera recorded everything. Maya mused. Yes. But presenting evidence too soon would also be a mistake. Elena blinked. How is that wrong? Because he hasn't finished, Maya replied firmly. He has more lies that will get him into a situation he can't escape from. I want him to say the words until he can't take them back. And that's what sets Maya apart from other CEOs who react on instinct. She doesn't fight with anger, she fights with strategy. The plane continued its journey. The afternoon sunlight slanted into the cabin, illuminating Maya's face. No sign of panic, just cold clarity. Elena sat down next to Maya. What are you going to do next? The press is spreading the news. Social media is divided. You have supporters, but there are also many who believe his story. Maya looked at a long streak of clouds outside the window. I know. Then she added, I want him to push himself to the point of no return. I want him to drown himself in the lies he thinks will save him. Hannah looked at Maya. Her trembling eyes turned to admiration. You're not only strong. You're also very calm. Maya smiled slightly. Calmness isn't something you're born with. It's something you learn after being forced to keep quiet so many times. A silence fell over the cabin. It was so quiet that you could hear everyone breathing. Then suddenly Maya's phone vibrated loudly. New notification from Dominic Hees on live TV. Maya opened the link immediately. On screen was Clayton. He was sitting in a makeshift studio, microphone in hand, his face haggard but heavily made up. She screamed at me, Clayton said in a pained voice. She called me a failure. She said if I didn't do what she wanted, she would use her power to ruin my career. Hannah exclaimed, he never talked to me that way. Elena blushed with anger. This is blatant slander. But Maya smiled, a very slight smile, cold, clear, and dangerous. Hannah saw it, immediately trembling slightly. Maya, you're laughing. Why? Maya put the phone down on the table. Then she looked at Elena, looked at Hannah, and said in a low, steady voice, because he just did what I expected. What? Asked Elena. Maya replied, he just said something that wasn't true on national television, which means he recorded it, the whole lie. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes as if she had just untied a big knot. And when you release the cabin video, he won't just lose the media war. He'll face charges of lying to the public and to the FAA. Elena looked at Maya as if she were looking at someone who knew every move. Hannah whispered, I am really ready for this battle. Maya opened her eyes, her gaze as deep as the evening shadows. No, Hannah, I don't choose to fight. But when someone tries to take away my dignity, I have to stand up for it. Outside the window, the sunset stretched into streaks of orange and yellow like the stillness before a great earthquake. The media storm was coming, and Maya knew she had to be ready. The next morning, New York was shrouded in a thick fog that covered half the city. The tall buildings were hidden, their yellow lights shining through the fog, making them look like ancient landmarks trying to hold themselves in the modern era. Maya Carter stood in front of the glass door on the 47th floor of Carter Group headquarters, gently squeezing a hot paper cup. A sleepless night. A night filled with texts, emails, and dozens of calls she didn't pick up. Not because she was avoiding them, but because she knew before she could speak, she had to understand the whole game. Assistant Dominic entered the room, holding a file in his hand. The counsel is seated. His voice dropped. They want you to explain the flight incident. Maya nodded slightly. I guess so. The worst news, Dominic said, hesitating. There's been an internal leak. A board member has sent documents to the media. People are asking, should a CEO be in charge of making unchecked decisions? Maya closed her eyes. She wasn't angry. It just felt familiar. The kind of familiarity that makes one sigh rather than react. Get ready for me. Maya's voice was calm. It's time to talk. The Carter Group's main conference room was huge, its ceiling as high as a museum dome. Familiar faces sat at the table, everyone from major shareholders to regional directors. They all looked at Maya as she entered. No one made a face, but the tension was palpable. The chairman of the board, Mr. Bernard Steele, a white man in his 60s with steel-white hair, spoke first. Maya, thank you for coming. His voice was polite to the point of coldness. Before you speak, Bernard continued, the board wants to clarify you asked the pilot to turn around a private flight for personal reasons. That is concerning. Maya sat down at the head of the table, her eyes steady. Elena and Hannah have confirmed with the FAA that passenger Clayton Reed was disruptive and making threats, she replied. That's why I prioritize safety. Bernard flipped through the documents, his voice emphatic. But the truth is, the media doesn't tell the story that way. Another member spoke up. Linda Marrow, a woman who always kept a safe position in debates, but today her eyes were strangely sharp. The story is tilted in Mr. Reed's favor. He claims that she was bullying, abused her power, and pushed a passenger off a plane because of a personal disagreement. Elena, sitting behind Maya, as a witness, blurted out, that's not true. Everything he said was a lie. Bernard waved his hand, not looking at Elena. We'll hear her out later. First, Maya, what do you want to say? Maya placed her hands on the table, thinking for a moment before answering like someone weighing each stone they placed on the foundation. Mr. Reed was not removed from the plane because of a personal disagreement, she clarified. He was removed for endangering the safety of the aircraft, which could lead to criminal charges. But you have no public evidence, Linda interjected. The council can't rely on words. Maya looked at her for a moment. The look in her eyes stilled the room. I have proof, Maya said. The cabin cameras recorded everything. There was a murmur of voices. Bernard frowned. So, why haven't you come out yet? Why let the media take the story so far? Maya took a deep breath. Because I want him to say enough. Her voice was low but powerful, so that when we release the video, everything he said will be used against him. A legal and media blow. The room fell silent. Elena looked at Maya, stunned with admiration. But at that very moment, a council member, Mr. Randall, pierced his angular face, his sharp eyes like someone used to dealing in cutthroat deals, leaned forward. Miss Carter, Randall said, I have to ask. Are you sure this isn't a personal reaction because you feel offended? Maya looked straight at him. Mr. Pierce, if a man kicked your sister's personal belongings, called her derogatory names, and threatened staff on an airplane, would you call that a personal insult or a safety threat? Randall paused. But Bernard quickly interjected. No one here supports Mr. Reed. We're just worried. The company will be dragged into this war you started. I do not start a war, Maya replied softly. I simply refuse to be complicit in silence. That statement silenced the room for a few seconds. Elena clasped her hands. Dominic raised his head, slightly pride evident in his eyes. But Bernard did not stop there. Maya, he said, his voice lowering, you need to understand. This company cannot be harmed by a rash decision. By this time, Maya knew the person who leaked the inside information was none other than Bernard Steele. He wasn't her enemy, but he was typical of a generation still unfamiliar with a black woman in the CEO chair. Uncomfortable, suspicious, and when things went wrong, he wanted to prove those doubts right. Maya put down the glass of water, her hands not shaking, her voice so calm that Bernard had to look up. Mr. Steele, if I wanted to use my power to humiliate Mr. Reed, like he said, I would have done it in the sky. But I didn't. I chose to let the system handle it. Bernard leaned back slightly. Maya continued. The only thing I did was protect my own safety and dignity. And if that makes you doubt my ability to lead, then maybe the problem isn't me. The sentence hit the air like a stone dropped into a lake. Linda gently grasped Bernard's wrist, signaling him not to push any harder. But Randall cleared his throat, preparing to retort. Before he could say anything, the door opened. A young assistant ran in, his face pale. Excuse me, but the hot news that just hit the headlines concerns Clayton Reed. Maya turned around unnerved. Elena turned her chair nervous. Bernard frowned uneasy. The assistant placed the iPad on the table. The screen displayed large text. Clayton Reed accused of making false statements to the press. FAA officially opens investigation. A video popped up, not the cabin video, but Clayton leaving the interview room, cursing at the backstage staff, threatening the cameraman, all clearly recorded. The council was stunned. Elena put her hand to her mouth and whispered, Is it someone from his crew who came back and leaked it? Dominic smiled and said loud enough for the whole room to hear. The media is not loyal. Only the truth is loyal. Randall leaned back slowly in his chair. Linda breathed a sigh of relief. Bernard was silent, more so than when he had questioned Maya. And Maya, she only said one sentence. The truth always has a way of returning. At that moment, the conference room was so quiet that you could hear the air conditioner. And Bernard Steele, who had once doubted Maya the most, looked at her with different eyes for the first time. Miss Carter, perhaps I underestimated you. Maya did not respond with pride. She simply said, Hopefully, from now on we can judge by actions, not prejudices. Elena looked up at Maya, her eyes brimming with tears. Hannah, who was standing outside the door as a witness, covered her chest with her hands, feeling as if she had just witnessed something right being done. Today, Maya isn't just defending her honor. She's defending young women like Hannah, women who are learning to stand up. And the next battle is just around the corner. New York at dusk was dressed in the silvery gray of old steel. The last rays of sunlight streamed through the glass of the Carter Group building, casting Maya Carter's silhouette on the long walnut conference table. The board meeting had just ended, and the members left the room with a variety of emotions: wariness, respect, doubt, and a moment of meaningful silence. They were beginning to see Maya with new eyes. But when the automatic doors closed, only Maya, Dominic, Elena, and Hannah remained in the room, those who had witnessed the truth firsthand and understood the importance of this moment. Dominic put his laptop down on the conference table and turned on the monitor. Maya, you need to see this. Elena and Hannah approached. Maya leaned over slightly looking at the screen. Dominic opened a video. The Carterjet cabin appears. The camera angle is sharp, the lighting is clear, capturing the entire moment. Clayton Reed kicks Maya's bag, snatches, papers, jostles, yells at the flight attendants, and says, "Some people don't know their place." Elena clenched her fists. Hannah turned away, her lips trembling slightly. Maya showed no emotion, just watched silently. This video, Dominic said, could save you. It could also end his career completely. Maya kept her eyes on the screen. Is it time yet? Elena asked, her eyes filled with hope. Maya looked up and looked at all three people. Not yet. Dominic frowned. Clayton is being victimized by the media. They are saying that you are an unruly, abusive CEO. The number of negative articles is increasing. If you don't fight back in time, no, Maya said again, more firmly this time. We wait. Elena sighed. What are you waiting for? This video can be rotated immediately. Maya leaned back in her chair, her eyes distant. I'm waiting for him to destroy himself. Hannah whispered. You mean, to let him tell more lies? Yes. Maya nodded. The more he talks, the deeper he digs himself into the hole. This video will not only clear your name, but will also serve as evidence that he lied to the FAA, the media, and the law. Elena swallowed, unable to help but shudder at Maya's sharpness. The young girl had never seen anyone handle a situation with such a calm, yet humane manner. Dominic flipped to another window. He just announced his second interview. It will be live in prime time tonight. Prime time. The time when America sits in front of its TVs, listening to the news, and the time Clayton chose to strike hardest. Maya gave a small but not warm smile. Perfect. Let's see how much he will hurt himself. Evening. Carter Group office. It was dark, but the lights from the skyscrapers created a river of light along the avenue. Maya stood in front of the window, observing the city as if it were a giant chessboard she was about to enter. Elena turned on the TV on the wall monitor. The 8 p.m. show began. The logo of one of America's biggest news networks appeared. Then Clayton's face appeared, worn down, paler, but still with the look of someone who felt he was in control of the story. The host asked Mr. Reed, can you describe a moment when you felt threatened on the plane? Clayton took a deep breath, as if reliving a painful memory. She screamed at me. She called me useless, and told the pilot to turn around if I didn't comply. Maya narrowed her eyes. He was going in the direction she predicted to sow more lies. Then, Clayton said something that immediately made Dominic stop. She also said, because she is the CEO, she can ruin my career with just one phone call. Elena's eyes widened. Oh my God, he's making up lies exponentially. Hannah trembled. Sister Maya, you never said that. I was there. Maya didn't answer. She just watched Clayton on TV, like a doctor watching a patient make himself worse by trying the wrong treatment. Then, the host asked the most important question, Mr. Reed, are you willing to swear that everything you have just said is true? At that moment, Maya stood up straight. Clayton looked into the camera, nodded, and said, I swear. Dominic immediately closed his laptop. Done. He's trapped himself. Maya returned to her chair and sat down with unusual calmness. It's time. Today, Elena asked. No. Maya shook her head. At that moment, a golden light shone on her face, giving her the calm look of someone who understood that timing was the most important thing in any battle. Tomorrow, Maya said. 9 a.m. Dominic nodded, understanding immediately. When the press was just waking up, when America was drinking its first cup of coffee. Yes, Maya said. That's when we give them the truth. The next morning, 8:55 a.m. Carter Group headquarters. In the small office of the communications department, Dominic, Elena, and Hannah looked at their watches. 8:05, 8:08:59. Maya walked in, dressed in a black suit, her face calm as if she were preparing for a routine meeting. But everyone knew this was a moment that would reshape the nation's narrative. Are you ready? Maya asked. Dominic nodded. The video cabin is ready. The sensitive parts have been cut out, leaving intact the entire part related to Clayton's disruptive behavior. Press release. Done. Respectful, concise, no personal attacks. Just the facts. Maya looked at the three of them. This is not for revenge. This is to protect the truth. Hannah nodded vigorously, her eyes red but determined. 9:00 a.m. Dominic pressed the button. Video now public. Within 3 minutes, every social media platform started shaking. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. All appeared simultaneously. Video cabin. Clayton Reed kicks Maya's bag. Clayton Reed insults the crew. Clayton Reed screams in the cabin. And Maya, calm cool, not causing any trouble. The first comments poured in. Oh my God, he lied so blatantly. This CEO is too kind to him. I have met such a man in my life. It really hurts. No one deserves to be treated like that. Text messages, emails, hashtags blew up within minutes. Elena covered her mouth, choking. They believe you. Maya. They believe you. Hannah turned to Maya, her eyes sparkling. You did the right thing, and others can see it. Maya exhaled, soft but powerful. Not joyfully, not proudly. Just that feeling after a big storm, knowing the ground beneath your feet is still there. In the quiet room, Maya said softly, today, the truth speaks for itself. And the next war, she knew it was closer than ever. At the same time the cabin video was released at a midtown breakfast restaurant, Clayton Reed was stuffing a dry roll into his mouth, trying to convince himself that last night's interview would turn the tide. His phone had been ringing non-stop since 8 a.m. He ignored it. He told himself they were just congratulatory calls. But at 9:02 a.m., a message popped up that couldn't be ignored. Clayton, have you seen it? From Hannah Collins. Clayton frowned. He was about to open the message when a waiter walked by holding an iPad that flashed a message. The audio plays exactly when the host says the cabin video released this morning shows a story that is completely contrary to what Clayton Reed testified under oath last night. Clayton paused. His hands stopped in midair. He looked up at the screen and saw himself in the Carter jet cabin, screaming at Elena, kicking Maya's bag, saying the words he didn't think anyone would ever hear again. You people always pretend you belong here. The sandwich fell from Clayton's hand and rolled to the floor. The restaurant was silent for a few seconds, then whispers spread like an oil slick. Is it him? My God, he's lying. I thought it was someone else, but it's Mr. Reed. He even swore on live TV. Last night, a middle-aged couple stared at Clayton. The husband shook his head in disappointment. The wife pulled back the tablecloth, avoiding his eyes like an oil stain. Clayton felt his throat tighten as if someone was gripping it from the inside. He jumped up the chair, fell over the glass of water, fell, and broke. I have to go. But when he ran to the checkout counter, the employee stopped him. Sir, you haven't paid yet. Clayton turned back, his eyes red. I'll be back, I'm being. The restaurant manager slowly walked out. Mr. Reed, our restaurant politely asks you to leave after paying in full. The words stung like a knife. Not because of the money, but because of the tone of someone once respected, now only annoyed. Clayton bent down to sign the bill with trembling hands. As he signed, he heard a whisper behind him. If I were Maya, I would sue him until he was broke. He deserves it. He thinks he can do whatever he wants with his money. Clayton turned around, his eyes red like a wounded animal. You guys don't understand anything, but no one looked at him. No one responded. Clayton ran out of the restaurant as if running away from himself. At the same time, at Carter Group headquarters, Dominic walked into Maya's office with an expression that was a mixture of joy and surprise. Maya, you should see this. He held out the tablet. A series of news headlines appeared. CEO Maya Carter is slandered. Video proves the truth. Clayton Reed exposes all his lies live. The Nation shares cabin video justice at 40000 feet. Over 2 million views in 20 minutes. Elena stood beside him, covering her mouth. So fast. I can't imagine. Maya looked at the headlines in silence. No pride, no retaliation. Just a gentle confirmation that things were going the way they needed to. Then, Dominic continued. The board called me. They want to apologize and want you to make a public statement this afternoon. Maya let out a long sigh. No, I didn't say anything this afternoon. Dominic blinked. But this is my chance to regain my image. Maya shook her head slightly. The image is not as important as keeping your originality. Elena asked. So, when will you say it? When I feel the need, not when the public wants it. An hour later, The news continued to explode across America. Legal experts analyzed the cabin video. Clayton caused a disturbance. Clayton insulted the crew. Clayton resisted the captain's orders. Clayton wrongly attributed the error to personal prejudice. A famous professor of psychology commented, "His behavior is classic of someone who is used to being in a position of power and loses the ability to accept when someone refuses to yield." A black journalist tweeted, "Not everyone gets the chance to fight back against a bully. Maya did what millions of people have wanted to do in their lives." Elena read all those lines, her eyes filled with tears. "Maya, they understand me." Maya sat still, her face as light as the wind outside the glass door. "I don't want them to understand me," she said. "I want them to understand the right thing." As Maya walked down the hall of Carter Group headquarters to her car, several employees lined the hallway. They didn't cheer. They didn't take pictures. They didn't make noise. They just stood there silent and nodded at her. An elderly security guard whispered as Maya passed by, "You have made many people see their worth, Miss Carter." Maya paused for a few seconds. A small, warm smile spread across her face, which rarely showed emotion. "Thank you for seeing that." When she stepped outside, the New York noon sky was gray but strangely clear, as if the whole city were breathing a sigh of relief that the truth had been revealed. Meanwhile, Clayton Reed closed the door of his penthouse, breathing heavily like a hunted man. The phone kept ringing. Friends, partners, companies, lawyers. He did not dare listen to any calls. A message from Helios Venture Capital popped up. "Clayton, we are asking you to suspend all duties as managing partner until further notice." Second message, "We are calling an internal meeting tonight regarding the misconduct captured on cabin video." Third message from his lawyer, "Clayton, you lied under oath during the live interview. This could be used against you." Clayton screamed, throwing the phone against the wall. The shattering sound echoed over and over in the large, but terrifyingly empty room. He sat down in his chair, his hands holding his head. "It's over. It's really over." In a rare moment, with no one to witness, no one to blame, he faced himself, and he collapsed, not because of Maya Carter, not because of the video cabin, not because of New York. For the first time in his life, Clayton Reed found himself without anything to fall back on when the truth confronted him. Back in Maya's office, Dominic said, "You won, Maya. You know that, right?" Maya held her glass of water, her eyes on the misty view of the Empire State Building. "No, Dominic. I didn't win against anyone." Elena tilted her head. "So, what do you want?" Maya put the glass of water down on the table. "I just want no one to have to go through what I went through, no matter who they are." The room suddenly fell silent. A beautiful silence. And in that silence, Maya knew the storm was not over. But this time she was not alone. She has the truth. She has her team. She has the trust of millions. And especially, she has herself. Maya Carter never bows to injustice. The next war is coming, and she's ready. The afternoon sun slanted down over Manhattan like a thin yellow sheet over the streets. But inside the FAA building on West 44th Street, the air was as cold as an operating room. An official investigation was underway, and this time, Clayton Reed had no chance of escaping the truth. The door to the interrogation room opened. Clayton walked in, looking ragged suit, wrinkled tie askew, hair disheveled, as if he had just woken from a nightmare. His lawyer followed behind him, his face as grim as lead. In stark contrast, Maya Carter was already there. She sat upright in her chair, her hands clasped together, her eyes calm, as if she were waiting for a conference, not facing a federal slander case. Elena stood behind Maya, her hands shaking slightly, but her eyes filled with pride. Dominic sat next to Maya, holding a stack of USB documents. When Clayton saw Maya, he stopped. It felt like someone had placed a rock on his chest. Maya kept her head up, not avoiding it. She nodded slightly, a respectful gesture. But to Clayton, it felt like the verdict had been read out silently. An FAA investigator invited everyone to sit down. "We are here to clarify what happened on Carterjet Flight 7G. The cabin video and Mr. Reed's public statements are in serious conflict. We need accurate testimony." Clayton clenched his fists, his voice hoarse. "I can explain," his lawyer whispered. "Clayton, don't say anything more. Just answer what you're asked." But Clayton didn't listen. He was desperate to hold on to what little dignity he had left. "I got agitated on the flight. She provoked me. The investigator opened his laptop. The video cabin popped up. The whole room was silent. Images of Clayton kicking Maya's bag. Clayton blocking the way. Clayton calling Elena a derogatory name. Clayton saying the words that he himself wanted to bury. You people should know your place. Clayton closed his eyes. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple heavy as a confession. The investigator turned off the video. His eyes remained cold, the gaze of someone accustomed to weak excuses. Mr. Reed, the flight requires passengers to not cause disturbances. Not only are you causing disturbances, but you are also insulting the staff and obstructing the flight crew. This is a violation of 49 U.S. Code 46504. Clayton shook his head repeatedly. I didn't know the camera was recording. I didn't think. Dominic interrupted his voice. Both suppressing laughter and polite Mr. Reed signed the cabin recording consent form before boarding the aircraft. Page 3, Item 12. His signature is intact. Clayton was stunned. The lawyer whispered Clayton, "We should be quiet." But the silence came too late. Deep inside, Clayton felt his life was fading like chalk. The investigator concluded, "We're going to transfer the case to federal court. Mr. Reed did wrong, and Mr. Carter." Maya looked up. "Miss Carter," the investigator corrected. "You did nothing wrong, but we need to confirm some more information." Maya nodded, her voice low. "I am willing to cooperate." Maya's words were simple, but when Elena heard them, she couldn't help but feel proud. Not proud because Maya won, but because Maya chose to stand on the side of truth, even though it wasn't easy, even though she didn't need to defeat anyone. When the investigation was over, Maya walked out of the building. They had no idea. There was a forest of cameras outside. Flashes exploded like white fireworks. The voices of reporters rushed in like a wave. "Maya, do you have any comments? Maya, are you planning to sue Clayton Reed? Do you think turning the plane around was an unreasonable personal decision? Are you aiming for any political position in the future? Maya, do you have a message about discrimination?" Elena panicked and stepped forward to shield Maya. Dominic tried to clear the way by using his hands to signal for distance, but Maya raised her hands slightly, gesturing for them to let her face it. She turned back and walked up the steps to look at all the reporters. The crowd suddenly fell silent, not because they were forced to, but because Maya's attitude made them want to hear her speak. "There are 3 things I want to share." Maya's voice was calm, no trembling, no anger, no desire for revenge. A voice made the whole street quiet down. "First of all, I don't want anyone to get hurt. Not even Mr. Reed." The clicking of cameras almost stopped. No one expected her to open her mouth with forgiveness. "Second, what happens on a plane is not just about a seat. It is about how we treat each other. When power makes someone think they have permission to look down on others, that is not power, that is weakness." A deep silence, as if someone had just held their breath. "And third," Maya looked straight into each camera, "I want everyone, especially those who have been overlooked because they don't look like the successful model, to know one thing. Even if the world tries to push you out of your position, you still have the right to stand up, not to retaliate, but to remind yourself that you are worthy of respect." A soft wow came from a female reporter, as if unable to hold back. Maya added, "I am not a hero. I am just a hard-working woman, but I will never regret protecting my dignity." Then Maya bowed politely. She got out and walked towards the car that was waiting with the door open. Elena walked behind Maya, tears flowing out of her eyes with emotion without hiding it. Dominic took a deep breath. "You just turned the truth into a lesson for the whole country." Maya replied softly, "I don't want to win. I just don't want to be silent anymore." As the car drove away, Maya looked back at the FAA building receding behind her. She understood. The legal battle had only just begun. But most importantly, she was no longer afraid of it. And in Maya's heart, a new belief was growing. Justice needs no shout, only steadfastness. The autumn morning in New York brought a chill that made people arriving at the federal courthouse pull up their collars. The sky was clear, but the sunlight was thin, as if the city was trying to keep quiet before an important event. At the steps leading up to the courthouse, Maya Carter stepped out of a black SUV, wearing a simple ash gray suit. No flashy bodyguards, no welcoming wreaths. Just Maya, calm, composed, like someone entering a meeting that demands clarity, not victory. Elena walked beside him, holding a file in her arms, her eyes filled with both worry and pride. Dominic followed behind the cold face of someone who understood the importance of this hearing. The reporters gathered outside again, but this time they didn't push or shout. As Maya passed, they quietly made way. It seemed that her statement the day before had made them look at her differently. With respect, inside the court, Clayton Reed was already seated. He no longer looked like a successful businessman, no longer had the perfect suit, no longer had the arrogant attitude. His suit was too big for his rapidly losing body. His eyes were dark, his face gaunt. Clayton didn't look at Maya when she entered, as if his eyes were too tired to meet the gaze of the person he had deliberately smeared. His lawyer whispered, "Let me speak. Say no more." Clayton nodded weakly, but in his cloudy eyes, there was still something left, like regret, like fear, like trying to hold on to the last piece of self-respect in his life. The hearing begins. The judge entered and banged his gavel. "We are here to consider Mr. Clayton Reed's interference with air operations, false statements, and violation of flight safety." Maya didn't take her eyes off the judge. Clayton looked down at his hands, avoiding eye contact. The first person invited to speak was the FAA representative. He clearly stated, "Cabin video proves Clayton caused serious disruption." Clayton refused to follow safety instructions. Clayton acted in an offensive and threatening manner towards staff. Clayton intentionally spread false information about the flight. When the cabin video was played back, the courtroom was silent. No one laughed. No one whispered. There was no sarcasm for Clayton, just the truth echoing like heavy music. Clayton stared at the image of himself kicking the old Hermes bag. He opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything. After the FAA presented, the judge invited Maya to speak. Maya stood up and stepped onto the platform. No hostility, no triumph. She began with a seemingly simple sentence, "I wouldn't want anyone sitting in Mr. Reed's position today." The whole courtroom was a little excited. Maya continued, "I don't want anyone to be tarnished, no one to be dragged down, no one to have their career ruined. What I want is safety on the plane, respect, truth." Maya's voice was low light but had a strange weight. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to protect the rules, to protect the crew, and to protect other passengers from being disrespected just because they don't look like someone in power." A female court clerk quietly wiped away tears when she heard this. Maya ends. "The court wants me to recommend a sentence or punishment, but I have only one request. Make sure that any flight crew has the right to stop a disruptive passenger and that everyone is respected in American skies." The judge nodded. "Thank you, Miss Carter. Your statement will be recorded." When Maya returned to her chair, Elena took her hand, gently squeezing it slowly, as if to send a thank you she couldn't quite put into words. "It's Clayton's turn." His lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client." Clayton suddenly put his hand on the lawyer's shoulder and shook his head slightly. He stood up. He walked up to the podium himself. The whole room held its breath. Clayton took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady. I have no one to blame. Everything that appeared in the video is true. What I said about Miss Carter was all lies. I was wrong." He looked down at the floor. His voice choked. "I didn't just lose my temper. I let my pride and prejudice hurt others. I apologize to Miss Carter. And I apologize to everyone who believed my story." Maya sat still, not nodding, not looking down. Just listening. He continued, "I know an apology can't fix many things, but it's the least I can do right now." In that moment, Clayton no longer seemed like a troublemaker, no longer seemed like a liar, but like a man finally seeing the truth about himself. Albeit late, the judge concluded. "The court will issue a formal ruling in the next 10 days. But on the current evidence, Mr. Reed faces severe federal and civil penalties." After the gavel, the hearing ended. Clayton turned to Maya, not daring to come closer, just whispering enough for her to hear, "I am really sorry." Maya replied in a voice as light as the wind, "I hope you will change. For yourself." As Maya walked out of the room, Elena walked beside her and asked softly, "How do you feel?" Maya thought for a few seconds and then replied, "Lighter, not because I was vindicated, but because I didn't let anger hold me back." Dominic laughed, and the whole country saw it. Maya. Outside the court, there were no shouts, no cameras pointed, Just a few people standing around looking at Maya with admiration. An elderly white woman walked up, placing her hand on her chest. Miss Carter, thank you. You speak for so many people. Maya smiled. I just say what I believe. As the SUV rolled away from the courthouse, Maya looked out at the city. The streets were crowded. People were in a hurry. But inside, everything was quiet. There was no sense of victory, only a sense of liberation, and a small but lasting hope that a more just world can start with small moments, like one black woman standing up to take her seat. A year has passed since the federal hearing. 4 seasons have passed through New York, bringing with them small but significant changes. Familiar streets have changed their signs. Carter Group has opened a new headquarters and public opinion has finally moved on. But no one has forgotten the day Maya Carter stood before hundreds of cameras and spoke of respect as if it were something sacred. This morning, Maya stood on the balcony of the 58th floor of the Carter Group building. The soft sunlight fell on the glass, reflecting her silhouette, a strong silhouette that did not need to speak to prove it. Elena walked up with a small document. Maya Clayton Reed's application for recertification has been submitted for the second time. Maya opens the document. Clayton Reed, once a senior partner, once so confident he thought the world revolved around him now, works at a community rehabilitation center in New Jersey. It's a low-paying, low-key job, but one that, according to his profile, he voluntarily accepted to right a wrong. Elena looked at Maya with cautious eyes. Do you want me to put this file on the decline, or consider? Maya didn't answer right away. She looked out at the city, her eyes distant as she replayed everything that had happened: the sound of the Carter jet, revving the police lights, the offensive interview, the cabin video, the applause from strangers, and Clayton's shaky apology in court. People, Maya said slowly, sometimes only truly change when they lose everything. Elena was silent for a few seconds. Then Maya closed the file. Send him an interview appointment. Give him a chance to present. But don't promise anything. Elena nodded slightly. It wasn't because Maya was forgiving easily. It was because Maya was the type of person who believed that justice and kindness could coexist if they kept the right distance. In the afternoon, Maya boarded Carter jet for a trip to Washington, where she was invited to speak at the Dignity in Leadership Conference. As she entered the cabin, she felt a flood of memories come back to her. Not a heavy one, but a distant echo. Hannah appeared from the front, now an air medical coordinator. She smiled. Maya, I heard you were going to talk about respect and leadership. I can't wait to hear it. Maya smiled softly. Hannah, I'm just saying what you've seen before. Hannah replied. I saw it, but I didn't dare say it. You spoke for so many people. The Carter jet cabin had been completely renovated, newer, brighter. But Maya still made her way to her usual spot, seat 4A. She set down her bag. An old Hermes bag, the leather discolored with age, the scuff mark from the kick still there. Dominic suggested, Maya, let me send it to a restoration company. They can make it like new. But Maya just shook her head. The scuff mark wasn't a wound. It was a reminder that dignity is never something that can be kicked away by a prejudiced person. Elena stepped forward. Are you ready for your speech? Maya smiled. Elena. It's not what people say that matters, it's what they feel. Elena nodded slightly. I know. The Carter jet lifted off the runway and soared into the clouds. Maya looked out at the vast expanse of sky before her. The expanse of sky that had been the site of her worst moments, but also the place where she found herself. As the plane entered a steady wind, Maya closed her eyes for a moment. In the silence, she heard familiar sounds: the engine, the clinking of glasses, Elena's footsteps, all of which made Maya feel at peace. Then, suddenly her phone vibrated. An email. From Clayton Reed. Elena gasped. You will open his letter. Maya pondered for a few seconds, then opened the letter. Just a short paragraph. Miss Carter, I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just want to thank you for not letting your anger turn me into a worse person. I've started over, and I'm going to try to be someone people can trust. Thank you for the second chance. Whether you give it to me or not. Clayton. Maya finished reading and put the phone on the small table. Elena asked, do you believe he has really changed? Maya replied with a sentence that left Elena silent for a long time. You know, the hardest thing in life is not to apologize, but to live in a way that makes the apology count. The plane continued to fly in the warm afternoon light. The next day, the Dignity and Leadership Conference took place in Washington, D.C. A large auditorium, soft yellow lights, hundreds of business leaders, social activists, and young students were waiting. Maya stepped onto the stage. There was no elaborate slideshow, just her hair tied back and a small microphone. A year ago, Maya began, I lost a seat on a plane, and that led me into a larger conversation with both myself and society. The auditorium was silent. I realized it wasn't the chair that was the problem. It was the belief that someone could be seen as less than someone else just because they didn't look like the person who should be sitting in that chair. An elderly white man in the front row bowed his head slightly as if in agreement. We often think of reputation as something big, but actually, it's made in small moments. A disrespectful remark, a prejudiced look, an act of pushing someone down. Maya paused, letting the silence fall. Leadership is not about power. Leadership is about what we do when no one is looking. There was a burst of applause. Not an explosive applause, but the applause of people who had just felt something touch them. Maya ended with a quote that has followed her throughout this journey. Even if the world tries to push you down, you still have the right to stand up, not to beat someone, but to affirm that you are worthy of respect. The audience stood up and applauded for a long time. Elena was so moved that she wiped away tears. Hannah looked at Maya as if she were a symbol of what she believed the world was lacking: compassion and calm strength. That evening, when Maya returned to her hotel room, she opened the window to see the city lit up like a star map. A small voice echoed in my mind. You stood up properly. Maybe it was her mother's voice, the one who taught her that dignity wasn't something someone gave you but something you kept. Maya leaned her arms on the door frame, smiling slightly. I'm trying, Mom. Down on the streets, life goes on. People walk, run, laugh, cry. But somewhere, a man in New Jersey is starting his life over. And a woman named Maya Carter chooses to let her story end with hope, not hate. In the night sky, the airport lights reflected on the clouds like a reminder. No matter the height, no matter the darkest moment, dignity can be the guide. The story of Maya Carter, the woman whose seat was stolen but who did not lose herself, has ended. But its lessons will continue in every listener. Thank you for staying until the end of this journey. If you felt something from the story, please take a second to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so that stories of kindness and justice can continue to spread. See you in the next story.